Maybe this is the time to make an intro. Here's the intro. Hi, my name is Dami. I'm a YA fantasy author, and today I am going to be talking a little bit about just updates with my writing and where I'm at. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, all that jazz. I'm really great promoting myself. Let's get to it. So, updates. I am kind of actively working on the edits for The Sun Has a Shadow. It's a YA fantasy book, and it is set in a world where the sun has disappeared from the sky. It's been gone for 5 years, and 2 teenagers embark on a journey to bring it back. It is set in the secondary world, so a world not like our own, but it is culturally inspired by my own Nigerian roots. But it was really fun to create just an entire universe, which kind of goes into the developmental edits that I needed to work on, specifically like world building tenets. My agent sent me 9 pages worth of editorial notes, so I had a bit of homework, and the one of the major things was kind of world building aspects. And so about me as a writer, I am an underwriter. I'm a character driven writer, and I tend to be an underwriter. So my first draft is kind of like me just getting to the points and just like developing the characters from there. So since I'm an underwriter, that means by the time my book is polished enough for other people to even look at, it's gone through quite a few rounds of editing to expand. One of the pros about being an underwriter is every time I go to edit, it feels like playing in the sandbox. Every time I go back to edit, I get to expand on the universe that I've created. And I might have already kind of in terms of planning expanded well enough in terms of world building. I have a Notion template that serves as a compendium for my fantasy novels, where I include, maps, where they're from, culture, religion, items, objects, all that type of stuff. And so even if I have all that planned out in my head, that doesn't necessarily mean it all goes into the book. In truth, having your world that fleshed out doesn't mean all of it needs to be in the book. There is an art to including enough world building tenets and enough of the world without like bogging down the universe with details. World building is hard. I'm going all over the place, but world building is hard. Even though in my brain I have like this very intricate fleshed out universe, that doesn't mean that's what it looks like on paper, because I tend to be an underwriter. And so every time I go back to my novel to edit, to expand, to kind of improve it, it feels like I'm playing in the sandbox, and I get to expand even more instead of cutting back. And so that's fun. I think it makes the revising process really fun for me, until I reach this like tipping point where the word count is a little bit in the wrong direction. In genre fiction, there are word counts that we are advised to follow, depending on the genre and the category and things like that. And so when I start to kind of tip over to the too long side, that's when I need to start tightening the story. And I think with this draft, I did reach that point where I needed to tighten the story a little bit. Before I started this round of revisions, it was draft 9. I considered it draft 9 of my story. And I think the word count was maybe 89,000 words, if I'm remembering correctly. Not even between 84 to 89,000 words. I can't quite remember, to be honest now. It was 84 or 89 when my agent signed with me. By the time I turned it back into her, we were a little bit over 100,000, which is not horrible, but ideally I have it a little bit underneath that before we send it out on submission. Some things that I did with this story, I included texts, like excerpts from different tests. This is going to be a tongue twister. I included excerpts from different in-universe texts at the beginning of each chapter. And I kind of varied, depending on the act and what was going on in the story, varied between a religious text, historical text, and kind of like a constitution / like the Federalist Papers, like articles of how we should conduct government sort of text. And what's kind of fun is, what was really fun about the excerpts was I kind of had the religious text and the historical text like kind of beefing with each other. So that was a little bit fun to write, like made it a little bit cheeky. So that's, added a little bit to the word count. But I love excerpts, especially in fantasy. And so I included that. So that was really fun to do. We'll absolutely need to tighten up the story though, to get a little bit underneath that 100K and to make every single word count. like I said before, I don't know if I've edited this out or whatever, but I am a character-driven writer. I That's what gets me into stories. That's what gets me hooked. I need to care a lot about the characters. I think that's true for probably most readers and writers to a degree. I know some people are more plot driven, some people are character driven. I like a good plot that moves me forward, but I'm here to see the characters play. So, what that means, I lost my train of thought. Let me go back to my notes. What did I say? All right. What I realized was I didn't really round out my main character's character development by the end of the story. And that doesn't mean to say by the end of the story the character needs to be a completely different person with completely different values or anything like that. But I really do believe that even though this is the first in a series, and right now it's planned as a duology, I do believe that a book should independently be able to stand on its own in terms of story beginning and story completion and rounding out a character arc. That doesn't mean the character has arrived to like their final evolutionary stage by the end of the first book, but I need to see that transition and it needs to be rounded out well, if that makes sense. And what I realized was, even though in my head I know where I want to take my main character by the end of the series. I know where I want him to be in terms of his thoughts and beliefs about himself, but I started off the story strong in terms of this is where he's at, in terms of self-esteem, in terms of his mental health, all of this. But I didn't show a good amount of growth in that in the first story. That's not to say that he needs to complete that sort of character development, that character arc by the end of the first book. I think he will complete it by the end of the second. But I wanted to see more growth in him by the end, and I realized I kind of slacked off a little bit. And so I changed some things, including like a very key scene. I didn't change the ending of my book, but I changed a very key scene. And I'm curious to see what my agent will think about it, honestly. Because I think changing this very key scene really adds to the character growth. Him making a different decision at this point, even though it doesn't change like the ending of the book at all, really changes how the reader understands the main character, changes how the reader sees his progression, sees his story. And I hope it also encourages the reader to believe more in him and kind of really want to see him succeed in book 2. That's all very vague. It's hard to talk about this stuff. I want to keep it vague. No spoiler alerts, all that type of stuff. So that's what we worked on. I worked on world building a little bit more. I worked on, kind of injecting that more throughout the story. And I worked a little bit more on the character development aspect of things and his character arc and character growth. Hopefully. Another thing that I started was the sequel, and it took me all week to finish chapter 1. It took me all week, which is very unlike me. I wouldn't say I'm a very fast writer, but usually it takes me 1 or 2 sessions maybe to finish a chapter, but it took me all week to finish this chapter. And oh my gosh, the flying here. No. And by the end of the week, I'd actually written, I think, like 12,000 words in total. But chapter 1 is just shy of 4,000 words. I think it's like 3,600 words. Chopped and deleted 6 to 7. A lot of those words, honestly, I think are duplicate words. I just kind of changed sentence structure and all this type of stuff. But it took me a while to finish the chapter, is my point. It took me forever. And I think it's because I've never really written sequels. I've written a lot of stories that were intended to be sequels, but I never actually started the sequel. I've planned out a lot of them, but I've never actually started a sequel because my thinking, even before I kind of really had the big goal of becoming traditionally published, was, why am I working on a sequel if the first one's not published yet? And technically, I don't know if this book will even be published, right? Like, a lot of books do die on submission. Can that little fly just not? And I'm being hopeful and I believe in my story. But I clearly believe enough to start the sequel. And so I'm not used to doing that. So that's very new. Another thing that's going to be different about the sequel is first book is in third person. This book is also third person, but it's multi-POV. And so having to think about, well, what do each of the characters know at this point in time? Where should the revelations be? And in which person's point of view should I reveal information? That's another thing that just makes it a little bit difficult, a little harder. Some tools that I'm using to kind of help with my writing. I think I'll make a separate video on my writing tools and apps and things like that. But I use Notion to basically organize my brainstorming, my dump stuff. That's where my fantasy compendium is. I it's one of Rebecca Mix's Notion templates, but I've also like changed quite a few things. I use Scrivener for drafting until it gets to this point where other people are helping me with revisions, and then I transition to Word. Aeon or Aeon timeline. When were y'all gonna tell me about Aeon timeline or Aeon? I'm gonna call it Aeon until I find out what it's actually called. Look this up now.
Aeon.
Aeon. Aeon. Okay. Aeon timeline. When were y'all gonna tell me about this application? It's amazing. Basically, it's an application where you can plan out your novel by timeline, as the name suggests. If you're like me, who sometimes struggles with pacing, it's very helpful. You can put in the events of your book, and you can include a lot of other planning information in there as well. And so you can also see, like, are my characters in this location for a very long time before they move on to the next location? You can kind of filter out the view by location, by character, by theme, by arc, that sort of thing. And the only thing that is a little bit QQ about Aeon Timeline is they don't have an option for you to share templates and use other people's templates. That'd be really great, because I personally hate making like software templates. I'm a customization queen, and so the only sad thing about Aeon Timeline is they don't have a means to kind of share and then customize a template. But yeah, so that's where I'm at. That's the update for now for this week. It's like middle of July. It's post July. What is it? I think it's July 6th maybe. Sorry, this video was a little bit all over the place. Yeah. What a mess. What a mess. That's okay. Well, thank you for stopping by. Thanks for watching. Thanks for being here. Hopefully that was mildly interesting. If there's anything else, or if there's anything that you think I should talk about or make a video about, or you'd like to see more of, let me know. But that is that update. You guys want to see my dog? Say hi, Winston. Thanks so much for watching. I hope that was mildly interesting. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, and the other stuff. And I'll see you in the next one.